What's up, friends? DJ here. Welcome to another week of Outposts. Man, it was so good to see you guys last week. I love that we got to do church outside and all get together. I'm so proud of you guys for sticking this out, not just sticking it out, but going for it. This week we're out here at Hermosa Creek filming the start of a new series. This series is entitled Components. You're going to get to hear a lot about it today. But the bigger deal is that today is Giving Day for Convoy of Hope. One day to feed the world. Now, this is a great campaign that we do, and it's not too late to give. Basically, you give one day of your wages out of the year to Convoy of Hope, and they multiply it 7 times to make a huge difference in the lives of the people that are in crisis. So God bless you guys. Sit back and enjoy this sermon. Hey friends, so we're starting a new series. This series is entitled Components. Here's the idea. Just like a great bike has a great set of components, the wheel set, the steering wheel, the drivetrain, the frame, all that kind of stuff makes up a great bike. In the same way, so does our faith. And if you want to have a vibrant faith, if we want to live in a way that makes a difference, we got to have great components to our faith. So today we're going to start from the ground up. We're going to look at the wheel set. And here's the idea today. The title of my sermon is Where the Rubber Meets the Road. And that's what a wheel is, right? The wheel transfers whatever's happening on the ground to whatever's happening with you and that bike. And to the measure that that wheel set is able to roll over all kinds of obstacles, well, then that's the measure that you're able to go on the path. The better the wheels, the better the connection with the dirt. And yet at the same time, if you're too connected to the dirt, well, we call that getting stuck. And we don't want to be stuck. Today we're going to basically raise this tension. How in the world do we live in this world and yet not of it? Because here's the reality. Our world, as we interact with it, it affects us like crazy. It's like this. The other day I was on a Zoom call with my friend, and right when I got on, he looked at me and said, "What is that ungodly thing on your lip?" I said, "It's the mustache, thank you very much." He said, "It's gross." Maybe you've thought the same thing. I don't know. Well, I like it, thank you very much. And this is actually a good analogy of how the rubber meets the road. I can do whatever I want with my life, but at the end of the day, it affects other people. They see it, and they're going to give me feedback on that. There is a force from this world, that's what the dirt represents, and there's a force from me, and that's what the rubber represents. And as the rubber meets the road, how in the world can we stay who we are? You know, how can we live in this way? So Jesus had to deal with the same thing. John 1 puts it this way. And the Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. We saw the glory with our own eyes, the one-of-a-kind glory, the Father, the Son, generous inside and out. What a great picture of Jesus. He comes and he moves into the neighborhood. And essentially that's what each of us are doing. Think about this. God living on earth, the infinite God, the God who created this universe, could do whatever he wants with the snap of the finger, instead chooses to become a man, chooses to become finite, and to basically be swayed or persuaded by the forces of this world. When we think of Jesus from this perspective, and how in the world did he stay connected to this world and yet clearly defined or differentiated? Man, we have all kinds of things to talk about. So recently, if you've been following along with psychologists at all, you'll know that there's been this big push towards emotional maturity. We call this EQ. And researchers actually tell us that EQ is the #1 determining factor. In fact, it's 60% of our ability to accomplish our goals in life. So it's more than our IQ, more than our resources. It's actually the single defining factor that causes us to be able to achieve the goals we want. That's crazy, right? How could that be true? That our ability to interact with people and sort of bounce off of what they're doing to us, how could that make such a difference? Well, EQ is defined by these 4 categories: self-mastery, self-awareness, social awareness, and relational management. Now, I don't know if you see that clearly, but it makes, you see the two pictures here? We've got the rubber and the road here. We've got self-mastery and self-awareness. That's managing myself. And in a little bit, we're going to call that defining ourselves. And then it's social awareness and relational management. And in a little bit, we're going to call that staying connected. And so this is what emotional maturity is. It's something Jesus did incredibly well, and it's something that we have to learn how to do well if we want to have this component of real faith. Now, for a minute, let's go back to the analogy of the bike, and let's just picture those two wheels as these two components we talked about. First, the back wheel is our connection, and that connection is something we always have to have if we want to move along in this world. We have to stay connected to our world. We can't disconnect, we can't disassociate, we can't just sort of go through in la la land because we are connected. At the same time, the definition is that front wheel. That's our defining who we are and allowing other people to define themselves, a lot of times differently than us. It's basically our ability to say, this is who I am, regardless of what I experience or how the world impacts me. Now, I want you to think of that analogy because where it breaks down, and this is where we learn the difference between Jesus' way of emotional maturity or living in these wheels, right? Versus the world's way is this. In our world, we tend to balance towards one or two of those things. And as we get, let's say, too connected on the back end, right? We get over-connected to our world. Well, what happens then is we need that connection so bad that we're not able to differentiate ourselves. So we lose our differentiation or defining who we are. And when we're over-connected, we become kind of I would say, fused with this world. We are unable to speak out about our own feelings, needs, opinions, and we have to sort of make the peace. On the other hand, if we get too defined, right, and the world would love for us to over-define ourselves, well, then we become less connected. We have to. It's like when somebody has to prove that they believe the right thing. Okay, so we are in the middle of a politically charged season. And in this season, the world wants to tell us that you either need to be over-connected or over-defined. You either need to make sure everybody knows your opinion, shout it from the rooftops and prove you're right, which, by the way, leaves you unconnected with the people around you, right? It just pushes them away. Or the world would say, you can't have an opinion of your own. Any of your opinions or questions are bad. You need to do exactly, you need to fall in line with all of these movements around us. You need to get it right, toe the line, etc. And as you do that, you find yourself losing that grip of your definition. Today, we're going to look at a story. How in the world did Jesus maintain that balance? I think this is the Jesus way of being connected and defined. So let's look at this story and let's see if we can see it for ourselves. The Pharisees went and plotted how to entangle him in his words. And they sent their disciples along to him, along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are a true and you teach the way of God truthfully, and you do not care about anyone's opinion, for you are not swayed by appearances. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" Okay, we got to stop here and just look at this situation for a second. This is an incredibly politically charged moment. This is like being in a room with Democrats on your right and Republicans on your left, and them saying, who did you vote for? Here's what they're trying to do. In a binary way, which means right and wrong, they are trying to force the God of this universe to pick sides. And when he does that, they know he will lose. And this is what our world tells us about being connected to the world. Basically, the idea is you're always going to lose, because if you define yourself, you will break connection with the people around you. And that's what's happening here. The Romans are going to want him to toe the line and say, yeah, you got to give taxes. And the Jews are going to want him to say, heck no, down to the oppressors, rebellion, don't pay taxes. And these sneaky little religious people caught in the middle think that they are going to trick him. Now, does that sound at all like the world we're living in, where it just doesn't feel like you can have your own opinion? It's almost like we're caught in the middle and there's no way to win. Well, I believe there is a way to win, and Jesus kind of models it. But man, you got to dig deep to find this. Here's what Jesus does. But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why put me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. And Jesus said to them, "And whose likeness inscription is this?" And they said, "Caesar's." And he said to them, "Therefore, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." When they heard this, they marveled, and they left him and went away. The first thing we see in emotional maturity is that Jesus is able to read between the lines. In other words, he's able to read the air and see what's motivating. Did you pick that up in the text? It says, seeing their malice. In other words, instead of thinking it was all about him, he was able to see them. He was able to stay connected. What's fascinating about this is you'd think that he would just accuse and just start rattling his mouth. I mean, he's God after all. He is the perfect judgment, But instead, he stays connected with them, and yet he stays clearly defined as himself. He doesn't feel like he needs to come down to their level. He doesn't need to prove anything. He doesn't have anything to show. He doesn't have to show them that he's smart or intelligent or funny. He's able to cut through the mess. And in this situation, he actually poses another question. He says, where's this money come from anyway? And in doing so, he's able to point to a way deeper, way more important principle. And that is that all of this is God's anyway. Why are we fighting over this? And what's fascinating, he comes out of that room where two sides are charged, expecting him to pick a side. He stays connected and yet defined. Now, I want to look at this practically. How in the world can you and I do this together? I want to give you two pieces of practical advice. First of all, the point I want to make is you are not defined by the world around you, and you have nothing to prove. I mean, did you know that? That your Heavenly Father, God Himself, created you. And when He created you, Ephesians 2:10 says He prepared the things that you were going to do. Psalms 139 says that you were wonderfully and beautifully made. Your identity doesn't come from the people around you. You don't need to prove anything. And when you get to that point, you can actually be defined by who God says you are. You don't have to over-define yourself, and you don't have to shrink back from being afraid to express your opinion. Jesus says it clearly like this. If you were of the world would love you as its own. But because you are not of the world, and I chose you out of this world, therefore the world hates you. This is the first thing you just need to know. It's that God chose you. And when He chose you, He defined you. And He said you don't have to run around looking for your identity. Here's the first practical in finding your identity. What are you doing right now that's helping you actively define yourself apart from what the people around you are saying about you? What are you doing that's helping fuel your inner identity? And I'd give you two practicals. One is spending time alone with God, meditating and reflecting on what He says about you. Number two, reading the Word of God consistently and understanding who God says you are. And then there's this second piece, remaining connected. See, how in the world do we stay connected amidst all this chaos and the election coming up? And it just makes us want to shrink back, right? No, don't shrink back. Here's my suggestion. Remain curious. I think one of the key pieces of staying connected with the people around us is to be curious. It's to understand that the people around you have walked an incredibly different life than you have. And just by learning about the people around you, it doesn't mean you believe in what they believe. We could benefit in our whole world with a lot more curiosity and a lot less judgment. And in this season where we just feel like people are at odds with each other and everybody's having to tell what they believe, what if you went into it asking, hey, tell me a little bit more why you've come to believe the things that you do. In this coming week, we have an election. There's going to be all kinds of people around you charged and expecting that you're going to be charged too. What if you came in as a non-anxious presence? Instead of needing everybody else to believe and vote for the same things that you vote, what if you were curious? What if you asked a lot of questions? What if you did a lot of research? What if you were just open-handed with trying to stay connected to the people around you? In Mark 12, Jesus said this, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. That is to stay defined, knowing your identity. He goes on to say, the second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. And that is to stay connected. He says there's no greater commandment than these. As I close, what I want to tell you is the people around you don't define who you are, but you need a healthy connection with the people around us. Let's go all in, trying to figure out how to stay connected and defined. All right, as we close, we got a few questions that I think are going to just create some great discussion in your groups. Here's the first question. Which one do you tend more towards? Do you tend more towards being over-connected with our world or over-defined in yourself? And the last question for today is all about going forward. Now, which one of these two ideas do you need to work on going forward? Is it solitude to more clearly define yourself? Or is it the practice of being curious to still stay connected to the world around you? And that's a wrap. Have a great week, everybody. I'll look forward to seeing you next week. Woo!